Well, good morning. Are you a entrepreneur, maybe a solo entrepreneur, and you struggle with what we call work-life balance? And you keep saying to me, I don't have any balance, or I don't have any time to spend with my family and friends, and all I seem to be working, and all those kind of questions. So today's episode is, can you really have work-life balance? Does it really exist? How can you achieve work-life balance? And if that's a question you've been asking yourself, maybe even laying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking yourself, how can I have work-life balance? Then this episode is for you. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. If you're watching this episode as a recording through my website, hangoutwithcoachkerry.com, make sure you go and watch lots of other ones and subscribe to, or actually download my free book on my website. I'll remind you about some of those ways you can connect with me later on in the episode, but I'm delighted to deal with this topic because it's one that, as a coach for the past 16 years, I have been dealing with really on a weekly basis with clients. Whether they have a business with 25 employees or whether they're a single entrepreneur working off their kitchen table or their guest bedroom desk. It's the same question, how to achieve work-life balance. And so today I have two of my VIP panelists on today. And if you'd like to know how to become a VIP panelist, please join my Google Plus community on Google Plus called Kerry Brown Small Business Coaching Community. Join that, and there's a place where you can connect with me about being a panelist. So today I have two of my VIP panelists who are going to help me unpack this topic, to uncover what it is that, what is the secret to work-life balance. And they are Kathy Scott and Grace Gary. So Kathy, I'm going to have you share with our audience who you are and what brings you to the world of business.
Great, thanks, Kerry. It's nice to be on again. I always gain a lot out of these sessions. My name is Kathy Scott, and I have a business called Niche Travel. What I specialize in is women's tours all over the world, and we have a wonderful tour right now in India and getting some great photo coverage of that back. And the next one I'm actually personally leading next week is Myanmar, so really excited about that, and all sorts of fabulous ones coming up for the new year. So go ahead and check on my website at nichetravel.ca.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Good. And Grace, tell us about you.
Hi, Kerry. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Grace Gary, and my business is Graceful Solutions. I'm a counsellor here in Victoria, although I also work on the phone. And what I do is when people hit a roadblock in life and they can't get themselves unstuck, what I help them do is get unstuck so that they can reach their goals. I have a special interest in emotional eating and difficult relationships, and my website is gracefulsolutions.ca.
Great. Thanks, Grace. So you can see why I'm honored to have these two great women on my panelists today. So again, what's our topic? Work-life balance. Does it really exist? Is it a thing of, is it a myth, or what is it? How to achieve it? What are the things you need to do to achieve it? So Kathy, I'm going to go right into you. What's your question for Coach Kerry today?
Well, actually, it's pretty simple, Kerry. Does it exist? I mean, can you have work-life balance? So that's it.
Yeah. And is this something, Kathy, that you've been asking yourself? Is this a question that has shown up for you a lot?
Oh, absolutely. Being a solopreneur and a home-based entrepreneur, I definitely can find myself working a lot more than I should really probably be working.
And when you work a lot more than you should, what are those things that go through your mind? I just wonder if the thoughts that you have will resonate with some of the audience as well.
Well, probably, am I being efficient enough? Is if I'm popping into my office when I should be doing something else, am I really as efficient as I should be? So I think that's something we all struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, here I'm going to tell you is that I believe work-life balance is a myth. And the reason is because I think that, and a well-intentioned myth. I think the personal development world has talked about, find your passion, follow your dream, follow your bliss, all of those kinds of terms. And that somehow when we start a business or have a business, that there's this equal scale, kind of like the legal scales, where you've got that equal balance that's there. So we have this notion that it needs to be balanced. And if it's not, then what's wrong? What's wrong with us? What do we need to be doing? Why aren't we doing it? And it's an opportunity for us to really be challenging ourselves and questioning ourselves. And I would say that the world of being a solo entrepreneur is filled enough with lots of reasons to challenge yourself. So I'm going to debunk the myth around work-life balance. So here it is that at different stages in your business, certain things will be askew. So if you are a new entrepreneur, you might even still have a full-time job somewhere, or maybe you've transitioned to part-time and you're starting your other business, which you would say was your passion, what you like to do. Then at that particular point in time, you've added something else to your time schedule. You've added something else into your 20-hour day, depending how long you sleep, maybe 15-hour day. So expecting that balance scale is going to be equal is unrealistic, in my opinion, because it's as if you need that extra energy, that time to get the train out of the station. When is the most fuel used with a train or an airplane? Well, it's takeoff. And the same thing with the train leaving the station. That's when it's going to require that most fuel, and fuel is your focus, and it's also your time. So understanding that there is going to be an imbalance when you're new in business or when you're growing in business. So until the point that you have created predictable income, you know exactly what's happening with your business, and you're satisfied with the status quo with your business, then you can maybe look at, okay, am I spending the time? Do I really need to be spending the time I'm spending in my business now? And maybe doing some adjustments. However, this is where I think also that's often where we want to press our advantage, where you want to grow, where you take on another project. You may take on another scope of your business. You might have another offering for your clients. So here you are at a stage where you've passed startup phase. You're maybe in the 2 to 5 year mark in your business, and now you know a lot of in your business, and it's time now to expand it, to grow it. Well then, how can you have that balance that's there, right? And then at the end of your business, so what you're working towards, ideally what you're working towards is you're working less and being able to reap the rewards of your efforts. That's the intention of having a business, is really at the end of the day, what do you want it to look like? I do an exercise with my clients quite regularly, which is, what do you want it to look like when you're finished? And too often they're saying, well, I can't have time to work on where it is, what I want it to look like when it's finished, because I'm still so busy working on it here. Well, the fact of the matter is that that's the intended result. That's what you're working towards. So you have to identify what you want your life to look like. So if you've done the things that you need to grow your business, if you've created predictable income, if you found a way to leverage your time in your business where you aren't necessarily doing all the pieces of your business anymore, even if you decide you never want to have an employee, in other words, someone who's on salary, you may have outsourced a number of pieces in your business, like a lot of solo entrepreneurs do these days. There will be a point when you'll be able to step back a little bit, and you'll be spending maybe less time in your business because now you have this machine that's working. So that's not a balance anymore, because now you're going to have more time doing what, spending time doing what you want to do and less time working in your business. So this whole piece is continually doing this up and down and up and down. So Kathy, based on this information I've given you, tell me how that sits with you. What's your thoughts, and if there's any questions that you have out of that for me?
Well, actually, I think it's kind of comforting, Kerry. I think what I'm hearing is that I'm actually exactly where I need to be right now in this phase of my business, and that down the road things will lighten up and I can take a little more time out. So it's great. I think that's what I needed to hear.
Good. So often I hear, and maybe for the audience listening to this, either watching or listening to a podcast on this, that you find yourself saying, I didn't go in my business to work this hard. Well, I hate to tell you that, but yes, you did. That is what it takes. You are trying to get that train out of the station or the plane off the tarmac, and it requires that energy and that focus that it needs at that particular point in time. So I would say is take that guilt off of how come I don't have work-life balance or why don't I? Yes, it may require you having some conversations with family and friends. It may to set up some new parameters of what that looks like. You always want to be very cautious about what your priorities are. So in sticking to those priorities and having those conversations. So Grace, I have a suspicion that maybe this is going to segue into a question you have for me. So Grace, why don't you ask me your question today?
Okay. I like the thing that you said to Kathy about how when you have your business more automated, in fact, you have the other problem that it's out of balance in a good way towards your life. So that's another way to think about it. My question is, I'm aware, and through a lot of the clients I work with, this sort of thing about how do you balance your life? How do you have enough self-care in it? And so I'm interested in the day-to-day management of that. How many things am I doing for myself? How many things am I doing for my business? And the question I have is, how do you know when to stop? Because it's time to wind down for the evening, and my to-do list is way longer than I meant to, or I still lots of things on it. And there's something about how to manage that piece of I've done enough for today. Yeah.
Great question, and I'm going to answer this with a bunch of different pieces in it. And for those of you again watching or listening, I have a number of episodes on time management, and time management tends to show up a lot in my episodes. Is that so, Grace? The question is, how do you know when it's enough? I'm going to back you up a little bit, and first of all, you have to be really clear on what your intended results are. So your goals, what you're working towards, because they're going to drive your activities. Mm-hmm. And the number one priority for any business, no matter what size it is to determine what activities you have to do in order to create predictable income. And until that happens, you have to get really good at managing or actually eliminating or reducing the number of things that are taking your time away from that number one activity, predictable income. Yeah. Because so often when we go into business for ourselves, and especially someone like you, Grace, who has that serving others piece about your business, is that it's so easy to fall into the trap of saying yes to a lot of things that actually, if you looked at them and really analyzed them, they're not directly related to creating predictable income. Mm-hmm. And so those are things that it's really good to say, yes, I'd like to do that, just not right now, or someday maybe. And so that's about deferring it. Having a way that you capture those ideas, that you capture that piece that you want to develop in your business, that system that you want to create. Predictable incomes first, then you systemize your business, because you systemize what you know is predictable. And so understanding that if you're at the stage where you're still focused on creating, and I'm not saying you necessarily, Grace, but for our listeners, our audience, is until you know what you have to do to create your predictable income, and then if you want to double your income, you just do, maybe not twice as much of that, because there will be some scale that will happen in that, is understand that that's where your focus is first. And learning to eliminate or become really, really discerning about other activities that you agree to do or that you're working on in your business. So that's where your focus is number one, predictable income. So I challenge all of you listening today, and my two panelists today, is to really be asking yourself, am I really focused on my activities around creating my predictable income that I've decided in my business plan and my marketing plan? Okay, so that's your first thing. Then the question of efficiencies. It's really clear, and we've talked about this on one of my episodes as well, where you want to look at what time of day is best for you to be doing certain activities so that you are the sharpest when you need to be doing higher level thinking. If you're just responding to inquiries or certain things that you have to do, then you can do that when your energy isn't as high. So really understanding that. So then you can put in those things into your calendar. I'm a firm believer of if you want it to get done, it needs to go into your calendar. So you're actually going to schedule that piece in your calendar. And every single time that I miss doing that step, it comes back to remind me that, oh, that I had said I wanted to do that last week. Didn't get done last week. What was missing? That if it had been in place, and that's one of my favorite quotes. So what's missing? That if it had been in place, I would have gotten that done. And for me, the answer quite regularly is have it in my calendar. So detailed pieces, rather than to-do lists, detailed lists of what I need to do. Now, as you know, Grace and Kathy, I'm fond of the list where you write down the things that need to get done, but you're identifying your top 3 priorities for that day. And it might be a really good exercise to look at all the things you've got listed there that you say are your to-dos and ask yourselves, are some of these someday maybes? Or are these, yes, just not right now? Because what we want on that list are things that absolutely are focused on what? Creating predictable income. That's what it needs to be. So having said that, I do think that even though I've said at certain stages in your business, when you're in business development mode, when you're growing your business, you're going to have this skewed scale where you're going to have more time in your business and less time for taking care of yourself and other people as well in your relationships that you've got, because those are very important. Because one of the things I know that happens is when you spend too much time in your business, working on your business, because of either you have incorrect priorities, you're doing things that could be someday maybe things versus predictable income, when you're doing things at a time when it's not most efficient for you, or whether you're allowing yourself too long to complete a task, where really you have to get fast and say, how many of these things can I get done in a timely manner? So if you're doing all of that, you also want to make sure that there are things that you are doing for yourself and for other people that are really meaningful for you. So that's what that self-care piece is to really step back and say, okay, what really is, like, what really fills me up? If you're extracting money from a bank account, at some point you have to put money into your bank account in order for it not to be at zero. So in terms of your energy level as well, you are going to have to put things back into that bank account of energy if you're expending so much to get that train, get that airplane, off the tarmac. So what are those things that are really important for you? And some of them don't even necessarily require a lot of time. For example, I really love the ritual of making a cup of tea middle afternoon for me. And that ritual, first of all, I get up from my desk, so that's called a state change. I'm changing my state, so that can change my energy level. It can up my energy level. I'll leave my office. I'll make a cup of tea. That whole ritual of making a cup of tea, looking out, appreciating the weather, looking at whatever there is outside, some nature, whatever it happens to do, gets me back into that mode where I can come back and I'm significantly more efficient at what I'm doing next. But I've done this little ritual that really nurtures me, that fulfills me. There's times when I have to do some writing, and I want to create the environment for that, and I know that fills me when I put on music that's giving me some self-care. I light a candle sometimes that will give me that self-care in my office. Getting out and going for a 15-minute walk can be a really good way for self-care. Because if you're spending 6 hours a day walking, then obviously and of course that was an exaggeration, but to make a point, again, where is that balance going to be? So what are those little pieces that you can do during the day that are going to fill you up? And so that conversation is, I never have any time for myself. So I want you to start asking yourself, okay, if I had little bits that I could take care of myself that would allow me to feel nurtured, to kind of fill up my bank account again, what would they be? A good friend of mine and fabulous coach of creative wellness is Linda Monk, and she recommends taking time to put word onto the page, to writing. So to journal. If that's something that nurtures you and fills you up, then that's what you have to spend. You have to find when the time of the day. And I think if you've been watching my episodes or listening to me long enough, it has to be scheduled in there. There has to be a structure in place to make sure that it happens. So those are the pieces that, yes, you have to add them in place. I also alluded to having conversations around family, and especially for those of you, I know both my panelists, children are not at home anymore, but if you do have children at home, then it's really important that you have conversations with them about where your business is at and what could you do with them that they would really like to do. So it's an event, it's something that you spend with them that they feel that you're paying attention to them, because the last thing we want you to do is be feeling guilty that you're not spending time with them. So it has to structure those pieces in place so that you know, plus then you know when you're working, you've got those things booked. If you haven't scheduled those things, then there's always going to be that little piece going on in your head about, I really should be spending more time and I'm not. And that creates inefficiencies as well. It's going to take you longer to do things. So Grace, I added lots of little layers into that one, but tell me how that lands for you, and if there's any questions that you have for me as a result of that, or comments.
Well, one of the things I like, Kerry, is the reminder about state change and how, for example, for you getting up to make a cup of tea, sort of you go into the kitchen, you're in a different place. And I find sometimes state change maybe to play the piano, to make dinner. A part of it is to not get so distracted with the state change that I forget to come back. So it's always a challenge to not get so involved in the new activity that I forget what I was doing, especially if I'm procrastinating. So that's just a note to self.
Yes. Yeah, so that's where you've got to put some structure in place. When I first started working at home, I'd end up doing laundry for an hour. Yeah. And it was because, of course, I hadn't really thought about that. So then this is where we want to do is we want you can only change what you acknowledge. So being aware that you might get distracted with something, then that means you put a timer on your phone.
Yeah.
That means that if you're procrastinating on doing something, you've got to create the right environment to do it. And for me, I find personally that if I go and make that cup of tea, then while I'm making that cup of tea, I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm going to devote 30 minutes to that, and I'm going to nail it, and I'm going to get it done. And that actually shifts me from procrastinating to actually doing it. Mm-hmm. The other little piece I'm going to have you take a look at about the procrastination is often procrastination is we don't know what our next steps are. Yeah. And actually the next step, the action we have to take. So when we're confused or when we're befuddled about something, we actually then won't take that action. And it shows up as procrastination, where really what it is that we haven't taken a moment to think about what's my next step. So thinking about those next steps and what that's going to be can actually get you into that action. So often when I'm making my tea, I'm thinking about, okay, well, this is what I'm going to write this blog article about. Oh, okay, now I'm ready. I've got my tea. I'm going to go sit at my desk. I've got this ready, and I can get myself into that state that I'm ready to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Kerry. That's helpful.
Great. And the other thing is, I know I've mentioned using timers as well, and I think that's a really key piece, especially if you that efficiency thing, because both of you have mentioned that, is we want to be as efficient as possible. And what I'm not saying is being sloppy. What I'm saying is working within a certain time frame. It's really interesting. I believe that time will expand, or the activity will expand into the time available. So if you sit down at your desk without an end time at it, without I'm going to give 30 minutes, or I'm going to spend an hour on this, or whatever that it happens to be, with that focus that's there, you can take 2 and 3 hours to do something that you might have actually got out of in 30 minutes. Because don't we all have examples of how we get things done when we're deadlines? I mean, I know, Kathy, for you, you've got great examples of that when you're heading off into another tour. How you've got a lot of activity that you've got to do in that short period of time. Funny how you get it done. So it's exactly the same thing with our days, is creating those deadlines, putting those in place that will force our activity within the time available. And I'm going to tell you right out of the gate, for both my panelists and my audience, this is information that I have to remind myself all the time, because I'm just like you. I'm a solo entrepreneur, and so for me, I have to put these practices in place all the time. And if I ever find that I have a week where I'm reviewing on Friday, because as you know, one of my tips is to always review your week, looking back at it on Fridays, and I feel that I have not been as efficient as I could be, then I take a look at these exact same things I'm talking to you about and saying, okay, am I doing self-care in this? Am I putting enough structure around it? because knowing that if you're in business development mode, you're going to be out of balance. So what do you have to have in place so that you are taking care of yourself, so your bank account is being full? So any last questions from either of you before I got some last things for our audience today? Maybe why don't you share your big aha for the audience? Kathy, how about you?
Well, I would say for me, Kerry, it is, well, first of all, the fact that I don't have to stress about work-life balance, because there isn't such a thing. But also, I know, you're reviewing the fact that setting timelines for things, setting a deadline on things is something that I would say I'm weak at. I'll get going, especially with things where I'm using the side of my brain that doesn't function as highly, which is my accounting side of my brain, and I can actually spend a lot of time on that when I know if I had to set a deadline for it, I would make myself do it faster. So I think that was a really good call.
Great, excellent. And Grace, how about for you? What's your big aha today?
I like the reminder that setting my timer. I think sometimes when I have time spread out in front of me, it doesn't work well for me, because but having said I'll do a half an hour of this or half an hour of that helps me. Even if it takes longer than that, it helps me to get my mind in gear. So that's a good reminder. I think if I actually tracked what I did for the whole day, it might shock me to see how much time I'm sitting in front of the computer as well. So it's like when you measure it, you can manage it. I think because I don't count that time, then I'm not actually aware of how much time I am on the front of the computer. So.
Yeah. Well, in fact, Grace, this is you deal with your clients on around emotional eating. One of the things they have to become aware of is what they're eating. So it's exactly the thing. You can only change what you acknowledge. That's you have to acknowledge it. You have to know what it is. You said measure it, manage it. Exactly the same thing. So So thank you, panelists, today for such great questions. I'm sure they resonated with our audience today. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel, Hangout with Coach Kerry. You can also find my website, hangoutwithcoachkerry.com, and Kerry spelled Kerry. And again, join my Google Plus community on Google Plus called Kerry Brown's Coaching Community. You can follow me on Facebook, Kerry Brown Coach. I'm out there, so please do connect with me and give me your feedback on what you hear on these episodes and the value that you have, that you're getting from them, because it's my inspiration comes from being able to inspire you, and it's my purpose. So again, thank you very much. Remember to hang out with me Monday mornings, 9 a.m. Pacific, with Hangout on hangoutwithcoachkerry.com. And watch my past episodes. We're at 30 episodes now, so lots of great information designed for you, the solo entrepreneur and small business owner. So please do check those out. So again, thank you to my panelists. I really appreciate your time and your questions today. And we'll be talking at you next Monday, 9 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.
Bye-bye.